So I'm recording this one, but Anne is going to send us a narrated version of this anyway. So one or other of the versions will be up on the website later on. So can I introduce Anne Carter, who's the Northern England Freshwater Project Officer for the Freshwater Habitats Trust, and she's going to give us a talk about medicinal leech and the survey techniques, which we hope we can carry out at one or two sites in Hereford later on, either this month or next month. So I'll hand over to you, Anne.
Okay.
Right.
Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, that looks good.
Right, okie doke. Well,
Yep.
like I say, today I'm going to be taking you through an introduction to the medicinal leech, which is one of our rarest and most interesting native invertebrates. So we'll have a look at ID, and then I'll tell you a bit more about the animal's ecology and habitats, and then we'll have a look at the survey methods. So first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about a background about the Freshwater Habitats Trust. So we started life as Pond Action back in the late 1980s, an organisation that has subsequently become Pond Conservation, with Jeremy Biggs and Penny Williams at the helm. In 2013, we relaunched the charity as a Freshwater Habitats Trust to spearhead the fight against biodiversity in all of Britain's freshwaters. So not just for ponds, but for all small water bodies, so including streams, rivers and ditches. The Trust places particular emphasis on creating areas of clean water, something that has now almost vanished from large parts of the landscape, and it's actually quite vital for our wildlife. So one of our current projects is a medicinal leech recovery project. The number of medicinal leeches in Britain has declined in recent times. Once found in high abundance at hundreds of sites, there are now only 4 main populations present within Kent, Hampshire, Dorset and Cumbria. In England, this unusual species has been pushed to the edge of extinction. The decline was initiated by the historical medical trade, where millions of leeches were exported abroad. But more recently, it's been changes in land use, wetland drainage, and loss of grazing that have contributed to its rapid declines. I'll tell you more about this later on. Because of their serious declines, medicinal leech are a global conservation priority and listed under a raft of legislation, international legislation, including Appendix 3 of the Berne Convention, Appendix 2 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, and Appendix 5 of the Habitats Directive, and on the IUCN Red List. So our main project objectives include establishing eDNA monitoring for the species. This new technological survey method will allow easy access to survey for medicinal leech, as it involves taking water samples from water bodies to test for the presence of leech DNA. We are also collaborating with zoos to secure native populations through living arc collections to provide a living gene bank in case of wild extinctions. So Herefordshire Wildlife Trust, as part of their Ice Age Pond project, which you guys know all about, have secured funding to help us search for this rare pond invertebrate at Moccas Park, which holds historical records of the species. So we'll be asking volunteers to survey the ponds at Moccas Park using the traditional survey method, which I'll introduce you to later in the presentation. We will follow up with eDNA surveys once we have the kits up and running, which hopefully will be next survey season. So now I'll introduce you to medicinal leech. They are the largest of the leeches found in the UK, and the only one known to feed on human blood. However, so much more defines the species, and there are many fascinating things to know about this marvellous creature. Medicinal leech have a similar morphology to that of other leeches, with a cylindrical, flattened body divided in segments. They have 2 suckers A posterior sucker uses leverage to move, and an anterior sucker, which contains the jaws and is used for feeding. Medicinal leech have 3 jaws with around 100 teeth that are used to attach to the host, as you can see here in this top right-hand corner. There are around 17 native species of leech in this country, but only 2 large leeches, the medicinal leech and the horse leech. Only one of these species, medicinal leech, feeds exclusively on blood. However, unlike common perception, they don't feed predominantly on mammals. Throughout the year, they will feed on the blood of a range of prey, depending on the season and prey availability. This includes amphibians, fish, birds, and mammals. Amphibians are often their favoured meal, especially during the amphibian breeding season in the spring. On many smaller species, they become more of a predator than a parasite, causing fatal blood loss. So the medicinal leech can reach up to 20 centimetres, so they are quite large beasts. They're particularly distinctive, having reddish-yellow longitudinal stripes along their upper side, forming part of a fairly ornate pattern. Some individuals, however, may be quite dark in colour. They are drawn to disturbance to feed and will attach and draw blood if allowed. Obviously, they'll be struggling with the waders here. So the horse leech is a slightly smaller, reaching up 16 centimetres in length. And unlike the medicinal leech, they are fairly dull and uniform in colour, with the upper surface dark brown to black and the underside green to grey. They sometimes have a lateral yellow stripe and flecks of black on the underside, but no yellow spotting underneath. Like the medicinal leech, they may come to disturbance to hoover up worms, but they will not try to attach itself to you. So a little bit of a comparison here. You can see here the medicinal leech can be quite variable in colour, as you can see in these examples. And if you compare it to the horse leech in the top right-hand corner, this is actually quite dull in comparison. And you can see on the horse leech, the yellow stripe down the side. Sort of looking at the medicinal leech in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see more of the ornate sort of spotting and markings. So what is their habitat type? Well, they're typically found in naturally eutrophic ponds, tarns and ditches with a neutral pH. The sites are generally shallow or with a broad, shallow margin, which are well vegetated with sedges, rushes and other marginal pond plants. But most importantly, the ponds need to have an abundant supply of food, so sites that are grazed with livestock are ideal. These are good examples of medicinal leech ponds. As I've mentioned previously, they tend to favour shallow ponds and ditches with fluctuating water levels that dry down during the summer. Shallow water helps to ensure water temperatures remain relatively high during the spring and summer, which is particularly important for breeding. For a large part of the year, when temperatures are low, leeches enter a period of inactivity and can remain buried in the mud or under submerged objects at the edge of the pond. And as the temperature increases, the leeches become very responsive to water disturbance caused by a potential host and swim towards disturbance. At most pond sites where they are present are regularly grazed, as I've mentioned previously. Grazing provides both food and controls vegetation growth, which ensures that ponds don't become too overgrown. However, grazing must not be too intense as the leeches require dense stands of long-leaved marginal vegetation to create cocoons in which to lay their eggs. They are an opportunistic feeder and can go for many months between feeds. However, they do require habitat which supports a range of prey, ensuring they have a succession of hosts throughout the season. Although medicinal leeches, as I've said before, are often reported as feeding exclusively on the blood of mammals, they will feed on the blood of fish, water birds, and especially amphibians. And tadpoles, as well as juvenile newts, are especially important for young medicinal leech as they are unable to pierce mammalian skin for the first 2 feedings. So a little bit about the life cycle of the leech. They reproduce sexually, and mating occurs via a tube-like male copulatory organ in summer. As leeches are hermaphrodites, they have both kinds of reproductive organs, and so they can produce both gametes associated with male and female sexes. Sperm is stored and this can delay from 1 to 9 months between copulation and cocoon deposition. The spongy cocoons are laid chiefly in July and August with clutches of up to 50 eggs. And these cocoons are placed in shaded humid spots near the water, but just above the waterline, so that the young can easily reach the water when they hatch. You can see here a little tub with some of the cocoons in and little baby leeches. Hatching time tends to vary between 4 and 10 weeks, and that depending on the temperature. And in the wild, a medicinal leech can take at least 2 years to reach the breeding stage. So they're fairly sort of long-lived. So I'll just take a little look at threats of medicinal leech. As I've said before, once a widespread species, they have dramatically declined over the past centuries. Initial population decline was a result of over-exploitation for medicinal use. There were few ailments that they were not prescribed for. The belief was that leeches were able to remove the bad blood that caused sickness. This trade hit its peak in the middle of the 19th century, and each year tens of thousands of leeches were exported to Europe and America. The European leech was favoured over its American counterpart due to the large amount of blood it was able to consume. It's likely that this trade has masked other factors that have contributed to the medicinal leech decline. Other principal reasons behind decline have been from changes in land use, wetland drainage, loss of grazing, and regulation of water levels. A reduction in the availability of hosts is another possible reason, where troughs are used instead of ponds to water livestock, so that the livestock are not going into the ponds to get their water. The introduction of worming treatments in the late 1970s and early 80s is also thought to be a key contributor to declines. As a blood parasite, medicinal leech are vulnerable to these chemicals through livestock grazing at their ponds. But the full extent and impact of worming treatments is not known, but is highly likely to have caused mass fatalities. So now we'll have a look at the survey methods. Well, the traditional survey method is actually quite a lot of fun and basically involves paddling around the edge of the pond pretending to be a cow. So if leeches are in the pond, they will swim towards you and attach themselves to your wellies or your bare legs if you're brave enough. The downside to this method is, of course, that the leeches may not come to the disturbance if they have already had a good feed or if the temperature is too cool. The full survey effort can also take around an hour and a half per pond. So hopefully, with the development of the eDNA kits, we will be able to detect leech presence by taking water samples from the pond, which will enable us to survey, just for presence absence only, a large number of ponds. And once it is established that leeches are present in a pond, this can be followed up again with traditional methods to do population counts. So going into a little bit more detail, in order to make the survey repeatable, a survey protocol was developed, which I'll go through briefly. So the equipment needed consists of a sturdy pond net, 8 sample buckets with lids, 1 for each sample point, which I'll go into later, a marker pen to label your buckets, a stopwatch, a plastic spoon to scoop up the leeches, and a clear plastic container with a lid so you can examine your leeches. You will also need a camera to take confirmatory photos of any leeches you find and to take photos of your pond, survey pond. So survey timing, medicinal leech become active in May once the water is warm enough, preferably above 19 degrees C. Although I have actually found leeches in early April. So a lot of it does depend on the water temperature. And they will readily respond to disturbance at the pond margin in search of food. However, as I've mentioned before, once they are fed, they do become quite inactive. So null response may not actually indicate absence. So we recommend undertaking the first visit possibly in May, and if leeches are recorded, no further visits are required. But if leeches are recorded, subsequent visits can be made in June, July and August. At the end of the season, it is possible to search for leech cocoons among the bankside vegetation. So basically, as long as the water temperature is pretty warm, there should be a good chance of finding leeches throughout that time. So how to survey? Well, the first thing you do is identify 8 locations around the pond perimeter where you can stand in the shallows safely. So you start at the first location with one of your buckets and splash with the pond net in the water, shallow water at this location for 10 minutes. Then wait for 2 minutes for the water to settle. So whilst you're splashing around, we will form little waves in the water, and hopefully the leeches will pick up on that and come and to your survey effort. So collect the leeches as they arrive and place them in the bucket. Ideally, you should put in a small amount of water and a bit of leaf litter to provide cover for your leeches. But do remember to keep the lid on the buckets because leeches can climb and they are great escape artists. And it's also good to keep the bucket in the shade until the survey is completed. And you label your bucket as location 1, so you don't get confused as to which is which. And then you repeat this process at each of your 8 locations. So once you've collected leeches at your 8 locations, you can begin to count the numbers you've collected in each bucket. So sampling in this way prevents double counting leeches that could swim between the different locations. And then finally, return your leeches to the pond. Once you've finished the survey, put the leeches from each bucket back into the location where you captured them from. So we have a medicinal leech survey in recording form, which can be downloaded from our website. And David also has copies of this, which he can send out to you guys. This gives you all the information you need to carry out the survey, along with space to enter the results. And please remember that if no leeches were found, then this is still a valid result and needs to be recorded. On the second 2 pages of the survey sheet, we also ask that you fill in some basic habitat information, such as pond size, surrounding land use, and vegetation cover. And I won't go into details with that now, but to help you, we do have a pond habitat survey booklet, which is available, and also David has a copy of this. And we also, on our YouTube channel, we have various how-to videos. So you can get all the information you need about filling in the habitat method on the videos. This is also good, not just for medicinal leech, but if you're doing any pond survey, it's a good resource to find out what your ponds are like. And if you want to go back and do a repeat survey, you can see if there's any changes. So now, hopefully this will work. We have a little video of how to do the medicinal leech survey. So hopefully I'll get that playing.
Oh. I wonder if I...
Can you hear that okay?
No. I think we might need to play it from my desktop.
Okay, I'll just...
Well, can anybody... I'm getting sort of very jagged occasional images. Can anybody else see that properly?
We can see the images, but no sound.
Right, okay.
Shall I switch that off and we'll go to your...
Yeah, I'll share it from here, if that's okay. If you can stop sharing your screen. Okay, I will now share my screen. And if I can find it, where would it be? That. Right. Okay.
Hello, I'm Naomi from Freshwater Habitats Trust. Today, Hannah, our Welsh Project Officer, is going to show you how to complete a standardised survey for medicinal leeches. Medicinal leeches are one of
I can't see that. I don't know if everybody else can.
Can anybody,
throughout history,
can everybody see that?
It's got your diary on.
We can hear it, but we can't see it.
Okay, hold on.
You can see your calendar though, David.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
19th century and subsequent declines in number and quality.
Stop. Share.
That's it.
Right, you see that, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, here we go. I'll get rid of that now. Hold on.
Hello, I'm Naomi from Freshwater Habitats Trust. Today, Hannah, our Welsh Project Officer, is going to show you how to complete a standardised survey for medicinal leeches. Medicinal leeches are one of the UK's most notorious pond inhabitants. Used throughout history as a medicinal cure-all, they were once widespread in England and Wales and have been immortalised by the likes of Shakespeare and Wordsworth. But over-collection in the 19th century and subsequent declines in the number and quality of freshwater habitats has driven this extraordinary worm to the brink of extinction. Surveys to assess their status were carried out in the late 1990s, but nearly 20 years on, the current condition of many populations is unknown. This year, Freshwater Habitats Trust are coordinating a survey of medicinal leech ponds in England and Wales. To do this survey, you will need to receive training and accreditation to the relevant statutory licensing. To do this survey, you will need clean, disinfected footwear, a sturdy pond net, the survey forms, including your licence and health and safety information to protect yourself and the pond from disease and invasive non-native species, 8 plastic buckets, a spoon and sieve to help you catch any leeches you find, a clear plastic pot, and a mobile phone to take pictures of your leeches and pictures of the pond. Medicinal leeches become active in April or even earlier once the water is warm enough, preferably above 19 degrees C. The leeches will usually respond to disturbance at the pond margin in search of food. However, once they have fed, they become quite inactive, so a null response may not indicate absence. We recommend undertaking the first visit in May, and if leeches are found, no further visits are required. If no leeches are recorded, subsequent visits can be made in June, July and August. We can now begin the survey. Place 8 buckets at different locations around the pond. You should try to space these out evenly around the margin, but only access the pond where it is safe to do so, avoiding steep banks or silty margins. Starting at location 1, stand in the shallow water and begin to splash the net up and down. The idea is to create ripples and vibrations to attract leeches to your location. You want the leeches to think you are an animal which has come to the water margin to drink, or the activity of breeding amphibians which appears to be irresistible to a hungry leech. Continue the splashing for 10 minutes in the same location. It can seem like a long time, but it may take a while for the leeches to become interested in travelling to your location. If you see any leeches during the 10 minutes, stop and collect them with the net, and then continue until you have completed the allotted time at that location. You may want to pause every few minutes to scan the water around you. Check your boots, as the leeches may have arrived without you noticing. Now Hannah will repeat the same process at each of the 8 locations. It is important to keep the leeches in the buckets until you have finished the whole survey. If you don't, you may end up counting the same leeches repeatedly as they follow you around the pond. It is also important to keep leeches from different locations in separate buckets. Then you can return them to the same place as they were caught. We don't want you to return them to an unsuitable location where they might be at increased risk of predation. It's a good idea to keep the buckets in the shade to stop them overheating, and you will need to keep the lid on as the leeches are very good at escaping. Once you've finished the survey, go through each bucket to count how many leeches you found and take a photograph to check your identification. In this bucket, we've got 2 leeches, 1 medicinal leech and 1 horse leech. Here's a reminder of how to tell them apart. Medicinal leeches are beautiful animals. They are large, up to 20 centimetres long, firm-bodied and highly patterned. On the upper side, they have a series of longitudinal orange, red, black and yellow stripes against a dark background. These can sometimes be difficult to see on wet animals and will vary in colour and intensity depending on the age of the animal and where you are in the country. Underneath, the yellow belly is flecked with dark spots to a greater or lesser extent. They will also behave in a predatory manner, heading towards disturbance in search of food, and they will bite if handled. Horse leeches are the most common species of large leech in the UK. They can grow up to 16 centimetres long, but are much less attractive than medicinal leeches. Horse leeches are uniformly black, grey or greenish in colour, with at most a greenish-yellow stripe down each side of their soft bodies and a few black speckles either above or below. Horse leeches are not capable of drawing mammalian blood, but they may swim towards your net as you disturb the water, looking for smaller worms or insects which could have been stirred up from the sediment. To confirm presence of medicinal leeches, take a photo of up to 5 of the leeches you've collected, including 1 shot of the top side of the leech and 1 from below. Putting the leeches into a clear plastic pot will help you to do this without the need to handle them. We've completed the survey, so now we need to put the leeches back in the water where we found them. At the end of the season, if you don't find any leeches, it is also possible to search for leech cocoons amongst the bankside vegetation. We recommend you only do this after talking with Freshwater Habitats Trust, as we don't want to cause any undue disturbance. We've completed the survey, so now we need to fill in the paperwork. First, fill in the basics, including the surveyor name, date, pond name and pond grid reference, taken from the middle of the pond. Programmes like Find a Grid Reference, Google Maps or Ordnance Survey are really useful for finding this out. At location 1, we didn't find any leeches. At location 2, we found 1 medicinal leech and 1 horse leech. We now need to record if there is any evidence of a breeding population of medicinal leeches at this pond. This is quite straightforward. We just need to identify whether there are small, juvenile, or large, adult leeches. At this pond, there was a mixture, so we do have a breeding population here. If you don't find any leeches, it's still a really important record, so fill in your details and submit the form. In the species notes, you can record any other species seen during the survey, in this case, a horse leech, and any other information about your opinion of the condition of the pond for medicinal leeches. There is a good amphibian population at this pond. It's unpolluted and grazed by livestock. There is also a good amount of marginal vegetation with dead thatch around the emergent stems. The leeches will use this thatch to lay their cocoons. The final section on the form is to fill in a sketch map of the pond showing the key features, like overhanging trees, emergent stands of vegetation, and the 8 sample locations. We would also like you to complete a habitat survey form for each of the ponds we survey. The forms and details about how to fill it in can be found on Freshwater Habitats Trust website. There is also a how to survey habitats video if you are not sure what to do. Now we've completed the survey, we can go back home and enter the results on the Freshwater Habitats Trust website. Thanks for watching.
Okay, I'm going to shut that down. Yeah. Right, are we all back? Excellent. So did everybody see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was
Good,
great.
good. Fantastic.
There was another slide on my presentation, but it was just any questions basically. So we can do that. We can do that now.
Yeah, in that case, any questions, anybody? I kick off. What I did notice, people will probably recognise that the forms that we've been filling in for the Ice Age Ponds project are based on the Freshwater Habitats Trust one. So for the ponds that we're going to be surveying, we've already done those surveys. So you probably won't need to, I don't think we'll need to repeat that.
Oh, that's good news then. It's
yeah.
good to know that they're being used.
Yeah. And there's a full certainly for lawn pool at Mockers Park, there's a full management plan for that one, and a full survey. So anybody else, any other questions about?
Yes. How many people should you take to a pond? Should you go in twos, or just can you go in and do it on your own?
Well, ideally, you'd want to be at least in pairs for health and safety. But I mean, you can go with a few other people. I mean, it needs one person sort of in the pond. But you know, if there's other people to observe, you know, because obviously, if you want to actually see the leeches, if you find them. So I mean, the photographs in the presentation, that was from a training session we did up in Cumbria. So there were a few of us there. We weren't doing the full survey, so it was just a sort of demonstration of the technique. But there's nothing to stop you know, a few people sort of being present. But it basically just needs one or two people. But I mean, like I say, health and safety, you don't want to be doing them on your own. But I would imagine that will you take a group?
Yes, I think the idea was we were going to take a group. I think we're doing it on the basis that we thought we'd need to have possibly 16 people, or you know, 8 points. So 2 of us at each point. But as you clearly point out, you know, you can obviously then go back and repeat other samples. So, but I was going to ask about the sampling points, because the lawn pool is quite a large pool. And, you know, is the aim to have those sampling points evenly spaced, or to select the right points around the pond? Because I think with the leech pool, the lawn pool, is that perhaps we should spread out and cover the entire site.
I mean, in theory, I guess if you're going to repeat that on the same pond, I'm guessing there's nothing to stop you doing more survey sites. But it's just, if you want to repeat it, that's the only reason why we do sort of the 8 points. So it's a repeatable survey. So if you're going back to the same pond each year, you know, you're doing the same survey effort. So you're doing 10 minutes at each of the eight points. But in theory, I guess if you wanted to sort of double that up, if it's quite a large pond, there's nothing really to stop you doing that, as long as if you're doing the same survey in subsequent visits, you're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, obviously you've got a lot of the ponds where they are actually quite small. So, you know, you can actually sort of do sort of the 8. But like I say, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing more. I mean, the main thing we're wanting for this is presence absence in a lot of ways. So the protocol was set up initially for ponds where, you know, you pretty much know they're going to be there, so you can do a count each year, sort of to establish whether the population's going up and down. I mean, obviously, there's so many variables with these things, because, you know, there might be a year when the leeches have all had a really good feed at the early in the season, and they might not come, you know, come to the effort. So, you know, it is quite variable. But I think the main thing we want to do at Mockers is to find out whether they're still there. So, you know, if you want to do a few more efforts, again, you know, we suggest going out once a month. There's nothing to stop you going out more often than that. You know, it depends on the weather conditions as well, because obviously you're better to have a nice warm day to do the survey. As I mentioned, I did some surveys in Cumbria in early April a few years ago, and to be honest, I didn't think I'd find any leeches, but I just sort of thought, oh, I'll go and see, you know, if they are around. And I did get a couple. It was a very warm day, but you know, April is really, you know, quite early. So I mean, hopefully, if we've got a pretty sort of warm summer so far, hopefully, if you've still got water in the pond, you know, you could even go up and go into September to look.
I think in terms of numbers, we're probably limited by the number of kits that we have, the number of nets that we've got. So it's probably about 8 or 9 at any one time. So that would probably be good.
Yeah. They've got a lot of cattle on at Moccas at the moment.
Yes, that's right.
And that's our problem too, because they're obviously going to, they may be a nuisance.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, yeah.
Is there a problem with overgrazing, do you think, on that site?
There is.
Yeah.
But there are because there's a sort of internal there's lots of trees, there's a sort of kind of a moat type arrangement around it. So the external part of the moat is grazed quite heavily, but adjacent to the trees that inhabit that are sort of in the middle of the pond, it's 4 hectares, this pond. There's marginal areas there which don't get grazed quite as much. Do you think that's accurate, Will? So there's some area, it doesn't all get grazed, does it?
No. I mean, they don't graze the emergent vegetation everywhere. There's only certain places they get in.
Yeah, that's right. Time to think of it, there's a lot of emergent vegetation, isn't there? Shall I go through?
It does sound good. It does sound a good habitat for the leeches. So
shall I go through the questions I've got on the chat? Barbara says, do they hibernate in winter?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, they just sort of become inactive, basically. So they'll just generally sort of worm their way into the mud and into the vegetation and just go into, just a kind of, stasis. So, yeah, I mean, if you try to find them in the winter, you won't find them because there's not the same sort of food supply and it's not warm enough for them to go out and feed. So, yeah, they'll just hunker down into the sort of muddy edges.
And Giles asks, is the time of day important for surveying?
Not really. I think it's more to do with the temperature. So, I mean, sort of early in the morning, might not be the best time. It's just really they need to have particularly warm water. That seems to be the key factor in them coming out and feeding. So if it's quite cold, they probably will just stay where they are and not come out. So, but I mean, apart from that, I think it's just a question of finding a good day that's quite warm, that you can go out and hopefully they will swim to your efforts.
Right. And Selena asks, typically how long does a medicinal leech feed for, and do they need ponds that don't dry up over the summer?
They can exist in ponds that do dry up in the summer, but it's similar to the great crested newt. So sometimes if ponds do dry up, the leeches, they will sort of, go into any damp sort of habitat and just sort of hunker in. But that would, having said that, I was going to say it would get rid of any predators. But I mean, obviously they want to, they will feed on fish.
Yeah.
But it's mainly the shallowness, because it's the shallowness of the ponds that create the warm water. So if you've got really deep ponds, you're more likely to have colder water. So it's more a question of a lot of the ponds that are shallow tend to be a lot warmer, rather than anything else. So that's the main thing with that.
And Barbara asks, how long do they live? Do we know how long they live?
I knew someone was going to ask that question. They certainly live quite a few years, because I mean they usually reach maturity in the wild up to about 2 years, and they can be kept in captivity for quite a few. So I don't have a definitive answer for that, but they are reasonably long-lived animals. Yeah.
Okay. And Selena's asking, is it worth recording the water temperature when surveying? I suppose we could do that quite easily.
If you've got the facility to that would be useful. Yeah.
Okay. And, I seem to remember, I think Giles pointed out that some of the images that we've had, what that I thought was a medicinal leech, are a slightly different species that's used commercially. Do you know?
Yes, there's the commercial leeches, the viburnum. so far we don't have any records of them escaping into the wild. And they do prefer a lot higher temperatures. So there's nothing to stop the leeches being in the wild, but nothing's been recorded. So one of the main things that we're looking at, because we're developing the eDNA survey technique, where we're going to be collecting leeches from the 4 main populations in Kent, Hampshire, Dorset and Cumbria. So we're also getting some specimens from the Biofarm leech farm in Wales, which are the Verberna, which are the European medicinal leech. So once we've got that in place, they can sort of filter out, as it were, the Verberna. So when we do the eDNA, we will know for definite that they are the medicinal leech and not the European ones. But as far as I'm aware, there's been no recording of the Verberna in the UK. That's not to say they're not there. It's the slight worry is that the leech farm, they do actually sell those leeches for fishing, for catfish. So there is a possibility that they may get out into the wider environment. Having said that, I'm guessing a lot of ponds where people are fishing would be quite deep fishing ponds anyway, so they may not be suitable habitat for the for that species to get established.
Would they interbreed?
I don't know, to be honest. I can't. That's a very good question.
Because that would screw it up properly.
It would, and it's something I should look into. But like I say, as far as I'm aware, there's been no records of that particular leech. So, and that is one reason why we're also keen to sort of check the genetics of the leeches, so that we know that the medicinal leeches in a lot of these ponds are the native ones. Like I say, I think a lot of the places where people would do the fishing wouldn't be suitable for them to survive anyway. So they might, if any get out there, they hope, cross fingers. But it is a bit of a worry, and it's one reason why we're quite keen to get some populations of the leeches. And at some point, if we can get the eDNA up and running, we've got potential there to look at other ponds that may have had leeches and possibly sort of reintroduce them to some sites.
Sarah just raised the point, is it possible to reintroduce leeches? But I guess you need to be absolutely sure that they're not there in the first place before you do that reintroduction.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, I know your site at Moccas has come up in discussions in the past, certainly with David Heaver from Natural England, who I believe is in your area anyway. So, I mean, he was quite keen for us to get this surveyed, because obviously there are historical records at Moccas, and we just don't know if they're there. I mean, obviously, if nobody's specifically looked for them, or if it's a big pond, there might be a small population, they might not necessarily, be coming to the survey effort. So we just hopefully we will find them. And if we don't find them during these surveys, then we get the eDNA kits that might just, bring them up. Because the beauty of that is, even if you go to a pond and the leeches aren't active on that day, the DNA will still be in the pond if they have been in there, so it should pick it up. And then obviously, if you've got sites that that you're thinking, oh yes, the DNA has confirmed that they're there, then you can go back and do the traditional surveys to have a deeper look, and possibly get population sizes as well.
So I guess there might be. Do you think there is more than just the lawn pool that we could look at Moccas, or is it just
well, the obvious site is Lower House Orchard, which is owned by Heineken, because that's the last place certainly this last place where I've seen them. In I think it was 2005.
Right. Yeah. Andrew,
we have looked since, and
we can do. Sorry.
Yeah,
we can do that. And well, I was going to ask the people. Presumably, at least some people here would be interested in helping with the survey. But for the Lower House Orchard one, Heineken have very strict health and safety protocols, and they would require negative COVID tests before we even set foot on their land. And it's all doable, but it's a bit of a faff. But I think it might be worth trying to do that if you think it's worth it. But so there's only really the lawn pool at Moccas where it would be worth.
Obviously the Leech pool. We've actually got a pool that's named Leech Pool. If it's certainly to do an eDNA test on that one. That because it hadn't been looked at biologically at all, so we just don't know about that one.
No,
although I have done some dipping, but that's not the same as doing I did a little bit of splashing there, but not.
I was thinking of ones on the Moccas estate close to the.
Yeah, well, those ones as well. There was a survey done. I think I mentioned. I think it was something like 2003, but it was done very late in the season, and all the results were negative. But who's to say? Some of the other. The pool we went to the other day was really nice, and there's Turner's Boat, and then there's the Broadmoor pool. Two really nice looking ponds with all the right sort of habitat features.
It might be worth doing those as well if we can.
Yeah.
Stephen asks, are these medicinal leeches endemic to the UK? So is it just this?
They are no. They are in other countries as well. Right. There are several different species of medicinal leech. Like I said, there's the Faberna, which is the one that they do at the leech farm. But they are in other countries as well. So not just endemic to the UK.
Right. Okay. Well, that was really interesting, Anne. Thanks ever so much for taking the time to do that. And we will put that up on the website and tell everybody in this in our team of volunteers that they can go and see it, and we'll let people know when the actual survey date is going to be. So we're looking at sort of it's a question of availability, because we're still doing pond surveys at the moment to try and get 40 odd ponds surveyed, basic pond surveys. So probably towards the end of August we might think about, well, it's up to Will really, because he's going to be supervising the actual day. So we'll let people know when it is and advertise that.
Obviously the weather conditions as well.
Yeah.
If it's a cool sort of rainy day, you might be, you might not be able to find them. So yeah, it is a tricky one. Like I say, hopefully once we get the eDNA kit sorted out, that's going to be a game changer, I think, for certainly if you're looking for leeches.
Absolutely. Great.
No, that's good. At least I know that we don't have to have 16 people present. That was kind of my point, that we can obviously do several sample points between us,
Yeah, like I say, normally if you've got one person, it'd probably take about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So, but if you're doing lots of different ponds, like I say, I don't think there's anything wrong if you've got, especially at Moccas, with it being such a large pond, you could split up into groups and do different sections. Like I said, the main thing about the collecting them and putting them in the buckets is to do, a repeatable count. So I think the main emphasis really on this is to find out whether they're there as much as anything. So I think the more splashing about areas you can do, that's gonna benefit. But it's just really, if you're wanting to do repeat surveys year on year, see how they're doing, that's when it comes into its own, really, the protocol.
Yes. We'll make a grid reference where we are, because it's quite a large pond. So a grid reference, and then mark it on the map. That's what you wanted. Obviously, you wanted the sample points marked on anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's useful because, like I say, if you even if you're doing more than sort of 8, you know, if you're going back, you know, you're going in the same place. So yeah.
We could kind of do 8 on one side and then 8 on the other on the same morning or something, couldn't we? Anyway, I'm sure with that sort of detail we'll work out later.
Make a day of it, wouldn't we? Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming, and thank you very much to Anne again for putting that on for us. Just a quick note, Rose has reminded me that with the Ice Age Town Trail in Hereford is starting tomorrow, which starts at the museum. It's for families and kids. So if you've got any kids or grandchildren that you're interested in, that might be interested in following a trail, it starts at the museum and then goes around a few businesses in Hereford, and you pick up letters of the keyword, and then you end up at the Black and White House in Black and White House Museum in the middle of Hereford, and you put in your sheet, which kind of looks like that, and you get a keyring mammoth. Isn't that amazing? So that's going to get everybody flocking in. And there's about 300 or 400 of them to give away for anybody that does it. So do tell everyone, because it's all about raising awareness and getting people involved. So yeah, thank you all very much, and I will few of the team, if they can hang back, and we can have a mini meeting. But thank you all for coming, and see you all by a pond one day soon, hopefully. Thank you. Cheerio.